Hello, Janine. Hello, Tom. Hello, Michael. How are you guys doing tonight? Welcome to a little extra class tonight. Hopefully everybody can hear me. And if you want to ask a question, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself in order to hear me, to ask your question so I can hear you. Or you can always ask your question via chat, whatever works for you guys. We got a couple more people just checking in here, so we'll get started in a minute when everybody checks in. The person who asked for this class, Shannon, unfortunately is not able to attend tonight. So I am recording this class and I will post it to YouTube tomorrow or maybe later tonight, depending on how long it takes to process, so that everybody who wants to watch it again is welcome to watch it again. And again, when you get a New Jersey real estate license, you're able to do both residential and commercial. And so this is a way to start your brain working towards doing some commercial deals. Maybe one a year commercial deal I'll do. Allie has done a couple of commercial deals this year, including a couple of deals where she had both ends on transactions that were over $1 million. That brought in $70,000 worth of commission. That's a big check. So again, commercial deals sometimes take a little longer to do, sometimes take a little shorter to do, but again, it's something that we kind of need to add to our tool belt for the long run. So we're going to go over some technical stuff tonight, probably go a little faster than everybody has the ability to pick up on it, but that's okay. Because we are recording it and you can watch it again later on. As we start this tonight, one of the things I have to remind everybody is sometimes Zoom doesn't work perfectly. And so you guys are going to help me by telling me that you can see the slides move, and you're going to tell me whether you can hear me or not, all important stuff. So we are going to have our class tonight. Let's see if I can get it to work here. So far, we're going so good. I just want to make sure we're sharing the correct thing here. There we are. So the slide you should be seeing should say cap rate, gross rent multiplier, and cash flow. These are all important things when we are pricing out properties that produce income, whether they're apartments or whether they're strip malls or whether they're storage units, properties that produce income. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot of research you have to do in order to use all of these methods. Some of the research is available in our MLS. Some of it is not. Some of the research you have to do is only in CoStar and LoopNet and Resi, and those are all membership only commercial MLSs that cost a lot of money to join. But a lot of the information sometimes you can find out from other sources. You can find out from Remine. You can sometimes find out from NAR RPR in their commercial section of NAR RPR. But sometimes it's just good old fashioned calling people up and talking to them, or looking at past listings or past advertisements. So again, we're not going into how to do research tonight. Tonight, we're going into just the tip of the iceberg and the mathematics that are involved. So cap rate. Shannon asked me to explain to her how we calculate a cap rate. And we have a formula for value by income. And our value by income is equal to our net operating income divided by our cap rate. Net operating income is your rent minus vacancy factors, minus your expenses like taxes and like utilities and like management fees, but not including debt service. So you do not use your mortgage payment in NOI. So your NOI is your rent minus your taxes, minus your management fees, minus your utilities, minus your insurance, but you do not subtract out your debt service. So that's what NOI is. So your value by income is equal to your NOI divided by your cap rate. And if you're asking, well, what in the world is my cap rate? We just manipulate the formula. So the cap rate is the NOI divided by the value by income, or the cap rate is equal to the NOI divided by what you paid for a specific property, if you want to know what the cap rate on your property is. And one of the ways of thinking about what is a cap rate is a cap rate is kind of the return you would get if you paid cash for a property. The return you would get if you paid cash for a property and you took all your rent and subtracted all your expenses. Now, remember, if you paid cash, you wouldn't have any debt service. So again, all your rent minus all your expenses divided by what you paid for the building is going to give you your cap rate. And we typically have enough information in our MLS to generate this on some properties if the real estate agent has done their job and correctly filled out the fields in the MLS that are needed. So that's cap rate. And that's one way to calculate the value of something or what return on investment a particular property is generating. Another way is a gross rent multiplier. And a gross rent multiplier is the purchase price or the value, the purchase price divided by the gross annual rent. So the purchase price divided by the gross annual rent. That's the gross rent multiplier. And what good does that do you? Well, it doesn't do you any good on its own, but what you do is you look at other properties that have closed and you calculate their gross rent multiplier, and then you create an average from maybe 3 to 5 other properties that you've researched and see what the average gross rent multiplier is in your area. And then you should apply that gross rent multiplier to your property. Now, in the book, in the chapter on appraising, it's going to tell you that cap rate and using value by income is a more correct estimate of value than gross rent multiplier, because gross rent multiplier does not take into consideration extraordinary expenses. So if you're going to use gross rent multiplier, you're going to have to make sure that you watch out for extraordinary expenses. And what could be an extraordinary expense? Well, you might have a building that only has one heating system, and that heating system is oil, and that heating system is, antiquated. So you're spending a lot of money on heating on that particular building. So that might be an expense that you wouldn't get in another building. So you would have to watch out for those expenses that are outside of your normal parameters, what you would accept. Okay, so that's a gross rent multiplier. Then we also have cash flow. Cash flow is how much income your property is producing minus all costs. And in cash flow, it's your income minus all costs. And this one does include debt service. But when we look at cash flow and we're looking at all the income minus all the costs, we also have to remember that there's an external cash flow and an internal cash flow. Your internal cash flow is the amount of principal you're repaying with your payment. And we're going to go over examples of all of this stuff as we move forward to show you kind of how it works. So we're going to start with one of my listings. This is one of the properties I have on the market now, and I have done my job by getting the expenses correctly into this property. This is 82 Pulaski Avenue in Carteret. It is a 4-family house. We have a purchase, we have it on the market for $750,000. And if you come down here, we're going to see what the gross stated income is. That's $65,280. And what the annual expenses are. That's $14,600. Now, those annual expenses include the taxes, and they include the insurance, and they include the electric meter that the owner has, because there are separate electric meters and separate gas meters in all 4 units, but there's also an electric panel and an electric meter for the common area lights, like the basement lights and the lights out on the front porch. So all those expenses go into the annual expenses. And the gross stated income is just the total of all the rents added together on a yearly basis. We also note that we have 4 apartments here, 4 units here. And sometimes when we are pricing very big complexes, we talk about our price per door. What is our price per door? Now, on smaller buildings, it's not so common to go into price per door. But if you're looking at a 120 apartment building, then your price per door is your price per apartment. Okay, your price per front door, your price per apartment. So let's talk about some facts here. First of all, why every time you look up something does it say Jersey City? And that's because on our all the levels that on a national basis, we divide housing markets into. We have a northern New Jersey, Jersey City segment that we're in. So you're always going to see everything as in northern New Jersey and Jersey City, because that is our regional market in terms of how everybody reports, in our economy. So the average capitalization rate for retail properties in North New Jersey is 6.8%. The rest of the country, it's about 6.9%. New Jersey seems to be priced higher than other markets. Hey, we all know New Jersey's priced higher than other markets. When we look at cap rates, again, for our Jersey City, North Jersey area, which is, we're not saying to look at this as if it's Jersey City, but when they segment it, this is what they call it on a national basis. This is the region we're in. For Class A, B, and C, Class A is properties that are in very good condition or brand new. So if you have a multifamily, your expected cap rate is 3.75 to 4. So 3.75% to 4%. If you have a Class B property, which means one that's a little beat up, the cap rate is a little higher, 4% to 4.25%. And if you have one that is in a even worse condition, it's 4.6 to 5.4%. So what is this telling you? What it really tells you is that if you have a property that's beat up, it costs less money. Therefore, your income is still going to be a certain level, but your return on your investment is going to be a little bit higher. So if you wanted the highest possible return on investment, you'd be looking at properties that were beat up, that would have a lower purchase price. And that's a very big generalization, but that's kind of what this is showing us. Now, in terms of suburban, once you get out of cities or an urban, you see the cap rate goes up. So if you're going to buy a multifamily house, you might really be considering buying in a suburban area rather than in a metro area or a high-rise area or an urban area. Now, what about if you want to buy retail? What if you want to buy a strip mall? Cap rates are a little bit higher in strip malls. What if you want to buy a strip mall in a suburban setting? Cap rates are a little bit lower in a suburban setting. That makes sense. If you're buying a strip mall in the middle of a city, you're going to pay more for it and you're going to expect a higher return. Offices have a 6.25% cap rate. Self-storage, and that's a new big thing. People are buying houses that don't have a whole lot of storage right now, and most people, and self-storage units are very big in terms of investments. And you can see they have a 4.7% cap rate all the way down to a 5.5% cap rate. If you get into industrial, again, slightly different. Hotels, again, we have a slightly higher cap rate, a return on investment. So there are all different types of cap rates depending on what type of property you buy, and what determines the cap rate is how much you paid for the property versus what the income it brings in minus the expenses. So this is kind of all what we're looking for, and this is as of 5/19/22. So very, very current information. And it doesn't mean that every property is going to be fall within these numbers, but listen, this is a big market. And so in the event you're shopping for a property or trying to price a property, why would your property be priced way outside of what's normal? Because that's a big market. Any kind of an outlier, there's got to be some kind of a reason that you're an outlier, because it's a big market. All right. So if we're going to price an apartment building, or if we're going to price a multifamily house, I'm probably going to sit down and do some research. This is going to take everybody a couple of hours to do all the research they need to do in order to come up with pricing. There's 4 ways that we're going to try to find the values. And if you've got enough information, this can all be done in 15 minutes. Number 1 is the average price per door. We talked about that. Number 2 is a gross rent multiplier. We talked about that. Number 3 is a cap rate, and we talked about that. And number 4, because really you can't trust any of these 3 methods exclusively, is to average them and see where you are. Okay, so first of all, you want to find comparable properties. You're probably looking for things that are 10 miles or less from the subject property, that are similar age, similar size, and similar conditions. This is the hardest part of this. So if we're looking for like a 2-family house or a 3-family house or a 4-family house, there's plenty of them in the MLS. So we can find comparable properties. Sometimes we can find some on Zillow, but if we want bigger properties, we have to go on LoopNet or CoStar or Reis. All of those are subscription only and they cost money. Now, sometimes you can do a backward search for this kind of stuff because LoopNet and CoStar will let you search for active listings, but they won't let you search for closed, but you could search for active listings. And then if you can extract the information on the active listings, then you'll have an opportunity to kind of build a portfolio of what you should list your property for, not necessarily what it's going to sell for, because you're only being able to get active information from LoopNet and CoStar unless you join it. So again, you're going to look, through whatever you can find, and you're going to get as much information of comparable properties as you possibly can. So the next thing, once you get all that information, you're going to go through the steps. First, price per door of each property, then annual gross when the property is 100% occupied, the purchase price and the cap rate. Those are all information that you're going to get to gather on the comparable properties. We always like to see at least 3 comparables because if you don't have a big enough sample size, your data could be really thrown off. So first is the average price per door. This is the fastest and the easiest. You're going to look at what other properties are selling for, how many doors they have, and then you're just going to simply divide the price that was paid for those properties or the price they're being listed now by the doors, the number of doors, and you'll get a price per door. So on here, I pulled some data from some sources that I had, and we've developed a price per door. And this was for a big apartment building. One of them had 16 units. So what we ended up with was an average price per door on comparable A of $142,500, comparable B $154,200, and comparable C $141,350. That was the price per door, the price divided by the number of doors. And in the property that we have 16 doors, and we found that our average was $145,613 per door. We have 16 doors in the property we're trying to price. So 16 doors times 145,613 gives us $2,329,808. And again, that value is underneath the asking price. What does that mean? It means I didn't have closed sales data. And without closed sales data, sometimes the asking price is higher than the final purchase price. I don't subscribe to LoopNet and CoStar because they're too expensive. If we build up a commercial unit in Remax Best, we'll talk about signing up for LoopNet and CoStar. All right, so that's the average price per door method. Again, I am taping this and I will put it on YouTube and you can watch it anytime you want. The next thing is the gross rent multiplier. And the gross rent multiplier is the purchase price divided by the gross annual rents. The purchase price divided by the gross annual rents. Now, unlike value by income, where we have our NOI divided by our cap rate, our NOI, we take our rents and subtract our vacancy. In a gross rent multiplier, we do not subtract vacancy. We assume 100% occupied. So gross rent multiplier gives you an indication of value based on the rents the property has achieved. Properties with higher rents will achieve a lower or better gross rent multiplier in relationship to the sales price. So again, subject price, our subject property is $2,310,000, our annual rents, and as our purchase price, our annual rents are $258,800. Our gross rent multiplier is 8.9. That's 231,000, 2,310,000 divided by 258,800. That gives us a gross rent multiplier of 8.9. Now we're looking at our comparables. Comparable A, $2,295,000 divided by 250,600. Our gross rent multiplier is 9.2. Comparable B, 27800 divided by 306,500, 9.0 gross rent multiplier. And then comparable C, 2,450,000 divided by 296,750, 8.3 gross rent multiplier. What is the average of the gross rent multipliers? It's 35.4. So 35.4 is our gross rent multiplier. And so we're going to take our, that's our total of gross rent multiplier divided by 4, gives us 8.85 as our gross rent multiplier. That's our total of these 4, then divided by 4. And that gives us a gross rent multiplier of 8.85. Now we're going to go back to our original property that has a rent of $258,800, and we're going to multiply our $258,800 times 8.85, and it gives us a 2.9229 $380,000 value. And you can see again, the asking price on that property is higher than what it should be. Here's our asking price on the property, 23100. And by using this method, here is what it should be. So again, sometimes when a property is not selling, it's because everybody is doing this same math. Everybody is doing this same math. Okay, so that is the gross rent multiplier. And why is the gross rent multiplier not as good as value by income? Because it doesn't take into consideration extraordinary expenses. Now there's the cap rate, and we've done the cap rate. We talked about the cap rate. So again, we've used the value by income method, and we said, here's the price of the property, and we're looking for the cap rate. So the cap rate, let's go back to that slide. The cap rate is the net operating income divided by the value by income. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each of these properties, and from the information we have, we're going to develop a cap rate for each of the properties. Now, again, I pulled some stuff that I could find the information on apartment buildings. Not easy to find, who knows what apartment building you're going to find. And we can see our subject properties cap rate is 6.5%, and we found 6.2, 6.7, 6.0, doing the same thing. We're going to add them all up, divide them by 4. We have a 6.35% average on all 4 properties. And if we do our 6.35% average on the property, so our value is going to be equal to our net operating income divided by our cap rate. So if we take our net operating income on the property, which is $150,950, and we divide it by 6.35, we come up with a $2,377,165 value. And what this is telling us, by the way, is each of these different methods is giving us a slightly different number. So one of the things you might do, oops, we have a question here. I'll answer that question in a minute, Michael. So in just a minute. So again, one of the things that you can do is you can take your values that you found by each of the different methods, add them together, and then divide by 3, and then come up with an average. So what this does is it lumps all the different methods in together and averages them out. So this is a very subjective way to do this stuff. It's not a science, it's more of an art. And again, the question that Michael just asked is, what's a good cap rate? Well, a good cap rate, here's cap rates in New Jersey. A good cap rate, if you're buying a multifamily home in a suburban area, a good cap rate would be something over 4.5. A good cap rate would be something like 5% or 6%. And remember, in our definition of cap rate, we could really define cap rate as an imaginary number. If you paid cash for the building and you took all of your income and divided it, all of your net operating income, if you paid cash for the building and you took your income and divided it by your cap rate, that would give you your value. So the higher the number of your cap rate, the better return on your building. So again, what's a good cap rate? 6%, 7% is a good cap rate. What do people look for? What do people look for? They look for 8 and 9% cap rates, because if they want to invest their money, if it was cash and they were investing $1 million, they'd want to get an 8% return on their $1 million. So on this particular building, the gross rent is $65,280. Our expenses are $14,600. So we can figure out what our cap rate is on this building on Pulaski in Carteret. Our cap rate is 6.7%. So if somebody were to pay $750,000 for the property, and we know that our net operating income is $50,680 because it's the total income divided by the expenses. We know our net operating income is $50,680, and we divide that by the $750,000 price of the building. The cap rate is 6.7. So this is a decent investment. This is a decent cap rate, and it certainly falls into the parameter of what is basically acceptable in New Jersey, right? Even for a Class C, we're only at a 5.5 cap rate. This is probably getting towards a Class C property because it's in, a little bit beat up, but 6.7 is better than 5.5. So again, it's what is your question was, what's a good cap rate? So anything above what everybody else gets, everything that's above what everybody else gets is a good cap rate. If you're doing self-storage, if you can get a cap rate of 7, you're above what everybody else is getting. So that's a good cap rate, right? If you want to get exactly what the market is and you have a brand new all self-storage, your cap rate is only going to be 5% because that's what everybody else is getting. And since it's a big market, everything is really priced by exactly what everybody else is getting. There's aren't really that many outliers unless somebody made a big mistake or somebody has a big urgency to sell. And sometimes people have a big urgency to sell. Remember, market price is what a ready, willing, and able seller, not forced to sell, will sell for to a ready, willing, and able buyer, not forced to buy, with a reasonable amount of marketing time. So sometimes people's urgencies or motivations changes, and they will sell a property for a very low price, which when you buy it gives you a very high cap rate. All right. So on this property that we have, the price per door, $750,000 divided by 4 is $187,500. That's our price per door. Let's go up and look at our price per doors on our big apartment complexes. They're at $144,000 or $154,000. So on this smaller building, our price per door is higher than if you were buying a big apartment complex, because we're at $187,500 here. Now, the gross rent multiplier for Middlesex County average that's put out by the Middlesex County Economic Development Corporation, part of Middlesex County, says that the gross rent multiplier in New Brunswick, at Middlesex County, the average is 10.42. How do they know that? Good question. Because when you have a rental property, you are supposed to supply your municipality with a statement of income and expenses. And that statement of income and expenses, they put them all into a computer and they churn out what's the average gross rent multiplier. This isn't as good as a value by income because this doesn't take into consideration other factors, but it gives you an average gross rent multiplier for Middlesex County. So our gross rent multiplier for Middlesex County is 10.42. So if we take my property again that I have on the market on Pulaski in Carteret, here's our income. And remember, this is our gross income, not our net income. Here's our gross income, $65,280. If we use this average value, the property should be priced at $680,217. So on that specific property in Carteret, under gross rent multiplier, we should probably price it at $680. If we're going with the price per door that everybody else has, and our price per door here is that everybody else has is the average is 145,000 price per door. So if we go into the price per door everybody else has times 4, property should be priced at $580. And my seller's got it priced at $750. So no wonder he's not selling it. Now we do have a good cap rate the cap rate gives us a valuation of somewhere around 750. But if we take the average of the three, we're going to probably be closer to about $670,000 as the price that people would really want to pay for this building. Now, we can do the old-fashioned way. We can go pull other comparable sales in Carteret and find other things that sold for similar prices and see what they sold for, especially in a crazy market like this where people are overpaying. We haven't gotten an offer yet at 750. We have gotten offers at 650. And 650 seems to be, after doing all this work, 650 seems to be what the price really should be. Of course, my seller isn't interested in selling because he's making $65,000 a year in income on this property. And again, he's making $65,000 minus 14.6. So he's netting $50,000 a year income. So, he's not quite that eager to sell because he'll be giving up his $50,000 a year in income. So, I've got my work cut out for me. Now we're going to look at cash flows, and we're going to look at internal and external cash flows. So on a commercial piece like this with 4 units, you're probably going to need to put 20% down. So I'm assuming here that you're putting 20% down on this property, which means you're going to be borrowing $600,000. By the way, this is an amortization calculator that's available in Rapatoni. You go into Rapatoni, you go into links, and you can find an amortization calculator. So I plugged in the numbers on this amortization calculator. I looked up what interest rate would be on this kind of a commercial property at 6%. And so if you borrowed $600,000 at 6% and you had a 30-year fixed loan, your monthly payment is going to be $4,680. That's your monthly payment, $4,680. And your payment on principal is going to be $597. So every month in the beginning, you're paying $597. It gets bigger as time goes by, but after 30 months, it's only at $690. It's like not a gigantic number, but you do have some internal cash flow. You are repaying principal. So we're going to take these numbers, our mortgage payment of $4,680 and our principal payment of $557, and we're going to develop internal and external cash flows. Let's see if I got a question here. Yeah, Way's asking, what's his profit on this sale? How many years of net income will it take to make the same profit if he sells? So if he's making $50,000 a year, if we take $750,000 and we divide it by 50,000, it's going to take him 15 years. And by the way, that is exactly the calculation investors use. They say, well, if I just hold on to it for 15 years, why even bother to sell it? That's why it's so hard to get sellers sometimes to sell buildings, because they know that. What can I tell you about rents? Rents are going up. Carteret has rent control, so his rents aren't going to go up really fast, but everywhere in the country, rents are going up. Last night on one of the news shows, they talked about in California, in Silicon Valley, a company has gone into business where they make these little pods that they bring into your house, and they're sleeping pods so that you can rent your house out to 15, 16 people at a time. Now, why is that all of a sudden something in California? Because California just changed their law, and you can no longer say how many people could live in a house. So if you can't say how many people can live in a house, why not have 20 people live in little pods, that are like just little, like the sleeper compartments in a train. And this guy has invented a way to have sleeper pods delivered to your house. You can rent to 14, 15 people in your house at a time. Crazy. But again, we can't have that here in New Jersey because we do have laws in our municipalities saying what's our maximum occupancy in houses. Someday that's going to be changed. All right. So anyway, this amortization schedule is easy to work with. It's in your Rapatoni. It's under links in Rapatoni. We're going to use this information to develop cash flow. So our payment, we're saying, is going to be $46.60 a month. I'm sorry, our income is going to be $54.40 a month. That's our net operating income divided by 12. It's going to be $54.40 a month. our monthly mortgage payment, that's our monthly gross income, $54.40 a month. Our net, we don't care about right now, but our mortgage payment is $46.80 a month. So that means externally, after you pay your after you get your $54.40 in each month, and you pay your mortgage payment of $46.80 each month, and when you go back to here, you see I've included taxes and insurance in here, so you don't have additional payments for taxes and insurance. So again, $54.40 a month comes in, and your mortgage payment is $46.80. You have $760 external cash flow. So at the end of the month, you got $760 in your pocket. But you also have a minimum, because it goes up every month, of $597 principal repayment. That means your total return each month is about $1,357, and it's growing every month. Your total return is about $1,357 a month. Now, if we take that $1,357 a month and we multiply it by 12, how much we're making a year is $16,284. And what's our cash on cash return? Well, we put down $150,000 on the house. And you know, here I'm making a comparison that's not 100% true, because you probably had $10,000 or $15,000 in closing costs, but I didn't put that in tonight's numbers. So anyway, you are having a internal and external cash flow of $16,284 a year. You put your down payment of $150. That's 20% of $750. That's going to give you a cash on cash return of 10.856. So you can understand why people do real estate, because you have a cash on cash return of as high as 10.856. And again, if you're buying a house like a 4-family, on a 4-family house, you could actually get FHA financing on this with as little as 3.5% down. Of course, your monthly mortgage payment would be more, and you'd have to pay MIP. But when you do these cash on cash analyses with very low down payments, you get very big returns on your cash on cash, because you're putting such low amounts down, like 3.5%. So this is the entire tip of the iceberg presentation on exactly how to price investment properties, rental properties, apartment buildings, you store it places. And, you know, this is just a analysis of the finances of it. There's all kinds of techniques to develop more income, to develop better returns. You can rent the property out and renovate it at the same time. You can increase the rents. You can cut your expenses, which increases your net operating income. You can put energy efficient devices in to increase your net operating income. You might be able to get tax credits for increasing your efficiency on windows or furnaces. That increases your NOI, which increases the value. So again, when you're playing with multifamily stuff or income producing properties, there are lots and lots of ways to increase your value on your building, to increase your cash on cash return. And as long as values keep going up, then you've got a double bonus, because you're going to get appreciation also. And then the last bonus you're going to get from this is, if it's a residential property, you're going to be able to depreciate it 27.5% per year. I mean, over 27.5 years, you'll get to depreciate it 1/27.5 each year. And if it's a non-residential property, like a storage place, you get to depreciate it 1/39 a year. So that goes a long way to reducing your taxable income on your personal return. So again, all good benefits from owning investment properties and owning multifamily properties. So when you're sitting down with an investor, you might look at what the cap rate is, look at what the gross rent multipliers is, look at what the cash flow is. And if the listing agent has done all their homework correctly, they have listed on the listing itself. And again, I'll show you where it is on Rapatoni, if I can get my mouse to work, but it's Looks like it stopped working on me. Go back to here, we'll do it again. Trying to do it with my hand now and it's not working because my mouse has stopped working on me. There we go. There we go. Again, on the MLS, GSI is your gross stated income and your annual expenses are $14,600. And you would never take the agent's word for either of these. You would want to call the agent up and say, hey, tell me how you came up with the GSI. Tell me how you came up with the annual expenses, because sometimes the agents don't include taxes in the annual expenses because the taxes are also shown up here. Sometimes the agents only include taxes in the annual expenses, which we know isn't correct. So, you know, when you're pricing out a multifamily and you're using other listings as comparables, call up the listing agent and have a conversation with them. As you go through commercial listings and multifamily listings in the MLS, you'll see that more than half of them don't have correct information or any information. So sometimes your homework becomes a little harder. All right. That's all I have for tonight. If you've got a question, ask it. And like I said, I will be recording this and processing it tonight and posting it on the YouTube channel so you guys can see it. And if you ever have a property that you're looking to price out, you know, come into the office, let's sit down and let's work on it together. If we have enough people who want to do commercial, I'll spend the big bucks and do CoStar and LoopNet. I used to do them. People didn't do many commercial deals, but if it's something you think you want to do, you know, we can talk about it. All right, guys, that's it for a Thursday night. And I will talk to you all. I will talk to you all during the week or over the weekend. Thank you very much. Oh, we might have a question here. Let's see what it is. Oh, so thank you. All right. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Bruce, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you buy another property as primary residence after how long, how many months, 6 or 12 months?
Can you buy an investment property first and then buy another property sometime later on?
First, so let's say I already have a primary residence.
Mm-hmm.
Can I buy another primary residence in 6 months?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's actually no time frame. So if let's say you have a primary residence now and you want to make that a rental and you want to buy another property, another primary residence, there is no actual time frame for that. The intent that you had when you bought the original property is what indicates whether or not you're committing mortgage fraud or not. Because if your intent was to never live in that original property, but you said you were going to live in it, that's mortgage fraud. But if your intent was to live in the original property when you bought it, but then you changed your mind somewhere down the road, then it's okay. So you certainly don't want to live in it for 2 weeks and say, I changed my mind, because they might say, okay, that's mortgage fraud. And what the bank would do is they would accelerate your loan and then you'd have to refinance and pay the higher interest rate. And paying that would really hurt now, because you might have got your interest rate when it was 3%, and now regular interest rates are at 5%. If you've never bought a home before, there is a strategy that says you should buy your first real estate as a multifamily home and live in it for a short period of time. And again, how short? If your intention is to live in it, then you're okay. So sometimes people, what they do is they express their intention to live in the property. They keep one of the units vacant while they completely rehab it. And maybe it takes 6 months to rehab it and it gets perfect. And then they go ahead and rent the entire building out, and then they buy their next property. Because what that does is typically your multifamily property is going to be at least as expensive as your primary residence. And you don't want to have to, you buy your primary residence first and you buy your multifamily second, and you won't be able to get a 3.5% down loan. You're going to get a 20% down loan. And so it's going to eat up a lot more of your cash.
Okay.
But if you're trying to hack the system. That's what I read on Instagram all the time. Here's how to hack the system. It's not worth doing. It's better to just, do what you're going to do first and then move on second. One of the problems is when you have a investment property that's getting rent, and again, in our 4-family that we're getting rent, and we're getting 65,280 in rent, right? That's what we're getting. When you buy your second property, and when they do your back end ratio, your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, plus your consumer debt divided by income, this 65,280 is going to be income, but your income is going to be offset by your mortgage payment, which we said is going to be $4,680. However, on regular Fannie or Freddie loans, they only give you 70% of this 65,000 towards income. So your income on this one, let's see, would be 65,280. Now times 0.7, that's 45,696, and then divided by 12, that's 3808. So they're only going to give you 3808 towards income, right? 3808 towards income, but your mortgage payment is going to be 4680. So that's $800 shortfall. So that $800 shortfall in your back end ratio reduces the amount you can borrow by about $100,000. So again, the ratios change, and the fact that they only given you 70% of income on investment properties towards your back end ratio, while they subtract 100% of what your mortgage payment is, it limits your borrowing power. I hope I explained it correctly.
Got it. And
Right.
if you buy a multifamily, let's say I will buy the one you are listing now, can I get mortgage as a primary? The 600K as primary residence loan.
So you're buying a second house, you're going to call it your primary residence.
Yeah,
They would want to see a lease on your first house, and then they would only give you 70% of the income towards your back end ratio. If you didn't have it leased, they're going to give you no income towards your back end ratio, but they're going to charge you whatever your mortgage payment is on your first house, which will severely limit the amount you can borrow on your second house.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Now, another question is, if you have a primary residence that you rent out sometimes through Airbnb, this is a whole new world. This Airbnb stuff is a whole new world. The IRS says you have to live in your primary residence for 181 days. So to call it your primary residence. So if you're going to rent it out as Airbnb, that means you could rent it out for 179 days, let's say. 181 isn't really half of a year, because 365 days in a year. So probably 183 is half a year. So if you wanted to be safe, you'd live in it for 183 and you'd rent it out for 182. I'm not getting the math right there, but 365, long day. 365 divided by 2 is 183 days. So you'd want to live in it for 183 days and rent it out for 181. In order for it to be the IRS to consider it your primary residence. Now, does the IRS come by and count how many days you're in it? No. But some states do. The state of Florida is very strict on this, because the state of Florida, if Florida is your primary residence, your taxes are different. So the state of Florida often audits how many days you lived in your house, and you would actually keep a track of the days you were there, if you were just barely making the 183 days that you need to be there. I don't understand how Airbnb works. I know how it works. I don't understand why it's legal, because I just don't understand why it doesn't count, but why you don't have to have a rental inspection to have somebody in your house as an Airbnb? Is it because you're really just like inviting them in as a guest and it's not really creating a tenancy? And then how many days do they have to rent from you before it's considered a tenancy? And I think in hotels, it's considered 2 weeks before it's considered a tenancy. But I don't know exactly how Airbnb works. I know how it works. I just don't know how it's legal.
Another question. Can I buy tax lien any time of the year? I know there's once every year there's auction, but how about the leftover ones?
So those ones that are in rem, the ones that the municipality buys back, if they have them available, they'll sell them to you. So if you wanted to buy an in rem tax lien, you just call around to municipalities and you'll say, hey, you guys got any in rems? And they want to sell them to you. But they become risky because if nobody bid on them, it means they have no value. The other way you can buy tax liens at any time of the year is, and I do this, I don't buy them, I research it because I'm looking for another potential use. The hedge funds that buy these tax liens, they don't really want to foreclose necessarily. And sometimes the hedge funds that buy them will assign them to you. So you can buy them from the hedge funds. And the hedge funds, they're getting a very high interest rate on it. So, they may be getting an effective yield of 11% because they got 0% the first year and 18% the second year, plus 2% plus 2%. So they're getting 11%. So they may sell it to you, but they may want 1.5 times the amount of the lien. And then they'll sell it to you when it ages out, and then you can go ahead and foreclose. So there is a secondary market for those tax lien certificates. And there's actually a convention for people who deal in those things, to go and find out where they all are. Now, how would you find out who bought a tax lien? You'd have to go in and look at the lien itself. You pull it up from the records, see who is the lien holder, and then you work your way through detective work to find out who has it and who wants to sell it. We've been finding out that the best way to do that is actually through LinkedIn. We try to find who bought the tax lien sale at the sales, and then we try to find out who is that whatever that company is, who's the decision makers in that company at that level, and then you just try to contact them. Now, I'm not smart enough to do that. Serenivis is doing that. If you want to get involved in that, we can have you who's in our office also. You can speak with Serenivis, and he'll show you where he is and what he's done on it. If you want to go to that route. But if you just call the towns and say, what do you have in rem? They're going to have stuff. They will have stuff. And not every town, but you call Trenton, you call Hamilton, you call Patterson, they'll have stuff.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Last question for today. In New Jersey, can the landlord check the credit history of the tenant, like the applicants? No, right? But if you sign agreement before you rent it out, you can check the credit history.
So you can check the credit history when the tenant gives you permission to check the credit history. The newest thing that you're not allowed to check is the criminal background.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. That's it. That's all I got prepared for tonight, and we'll see you during the week. I'll try to get something for next week too. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.